Okay.
Welcome, everybody, to Capes and Scowls. I'm Tim.
Schuster.
And I'm Kyle.
And we're going to talk about something near and dear to Schuster's heart. Women in refrigerators.
You scumbag.
Alright, so let's tell everybody what
You're so kind.
Women in refrigerators was about. Back in 94, 95? Something like that.
The golden age of comics, the 90s.
Oof. Did you barf a little bit in your mouth? Because I know I did.
It hurt a little coming out, so...
Green Lantern, when Hal Jordan went a little nuts and Kyle Rayner came in as Green Lantern, one of his early issues was written by Ron Mars. A lot of Green Lantern was written by Ron Mars. But in one of the early issues, he decided to kill off his girlfriend character, who really didn't have any other purpose other than she was his girlfriend. They didn't really develop her very much, but one of his villains chopped her up, threw her in the refrigerator, closed the refrigerator, and left a note on the fridge like, hey, got a surprise for you.
She gone.
You gotta...
And it was, needless to say, pretty controversial.
What?
Um,
Really?
so here's both sides of the argument in a general, basic kind of way. Ron Mars kind of said, hey, look, he's a new Green Lantern, he's new to superheroics and all of that. My idea was to give him this major trauma so that he's like, hey, this is for real. You know, the kid gloves are off. And to show that, you know, nothing's off limits. The families of these heroes can be attacked. Gail Simone, who is one of the greatest writers for comics, period, she took the stance of, why are you doing this to women? Why did you have to go this route where it's so graphic? And because it's a fair point that Green Lantern comics weren't quite where they are today. They were a little more geared towards teens and not children. Not to say adults didn't read them, but they were a little campier, a little more colorful, not as full of dread and gloom as they are today. And that book was not... I mean, it tied in with the Death of Superman storyline. Like, everybody was reading Green Lantern at that point. Well, a lot of people. So, you know... And it was right after Hal Jordan went crazy in that great Emerald Twilight story.
Oh, yeah.
Which was awesome, where he's like, I'm just going to go fly to Oa and chop off Green Lantern hands and steal all the rings. Hooray! So that was the argument. And everybody weighs in. And the reason we're doing that is, Kyle, tell them what.
I was sitting in this, for lack of a better term, awful class that I have.
I guess we're not showing this in your class now.
No classroom.
Whoops.
Video for you.
And it was about video essays and kind of how to portray them for us so we could do our own. And one of the essays we watched was about these women in refrigerators and the extensive list that continues to grow to this day of, you know, the morbid and ugly deaths and rapes and all that other jazz that they did to women in comic books, and tied it into not just Green Lantern, but like the death of Gwen Stacy, and other books too. And now it became like this huge controversy, and why it kind of relates to today with the whole feminism movement and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We have talked about women in refrigerators before on the podcast, but it's been a while, and it's kind of fun to introduce, because we have our YouTube crowd and we have our audio crowd. Sometimes their paths don't cross. The streams do not cross, Schuster. And that's fine, although you guys should check us out, capesandscowspodcast.com. Plug. But, how do you feel, Schuster? Now, you know minimal of this.
I know minimal.
Basically, what I've just said is what you know.
Exactly.
But that's basically all you need to know to start formulating an opinion.
Well, I can understand her viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're going to have a more kid-friendly, more teenager, young adult audience, going too heavy might be rough for some people. Especially when a book had never really done that. I can understand that. But on the other hand, we're talking about it 20 plus years later because of how dark it was, how abrupt it was, and it's probably has put an imprint in comics these days. So on that regard, I would have to agree with the writer in that was a good decision. It may not have been a good decision at the time, but it's a good decision in retrospect because broadened it showed a darker tone that eventually some comic books would have.
Right. So you like it in the sense that it changed comics
Pioneering may not be the correct word, but that
Right.
form of that is what I kind of am leaning towards.
Okay. Kyle, how do you feel about this?
Today was the first time I ever heard anything about it, and
That's
then
good,
just
though. That's fine.
looking into it, I can see why. But in a way, it's like, why do we just have to kill off the women in order to advance a plot or storyline of a male superhero? And granted, he presented the argument of, oh, we kill off the male superheroes all the time too to advance plotline and everything. But when you look back at some of the deaths, they're not as gory as stuffing a woman in a refrigerator
Right.
that they do with the men that they did with the women.
Right. I like the idea of doing something dark to present both sides of this argument. I like that idea. I feel like doing it the way he did was probably not the best idea. It maybe, I mean, I don't even think there was like a warning on the book. Like, you know, your kids reading that book wouldn't have had any idea. And I understand the outrage, and I love that people still talk about it today. I was so excited when you told me you talked about this in a college class. I was pumped. And I was like, I know everything about this. We've talked about this. This is great. It comes down to, was it the right thing to do at that time? No. Should it have had a warning? Probably. I understand you want to do that and advance your story. It did do that. It did it well. In fact, Kyle Rayner is a character that's very tragic. Everybody who gets close to him pretty much has some tragic ending. And that's a recurring theme. And Mars wrote a lot of Green Lantern, a lot of Kyle Rayner Green Lantern. And it's a recurring theme. But that nothing as morbid as that first one. On the other hand, you could say Kyle Rayner at that point had only been in a couple issues of Green Lantern, and there was no other character attached to him for that you knew of for him to demonstrate so much emotion towards. His girlfriend was there when he got the ring. So there was no one else that you really could have felt emotional towards.
Well, I don't disagree that they wanted to put an emotional punch on a new character to, get people to talk about the book. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a problem at all with that. But is the problem that they killed off a female character, or that they did it but they did it in a brutal way?
I think that's very brutal.
I think it's a combination of the two.
Okay. So in that case, if you're going to say that killing off a woman character was bad, I mean, they kill off male characters, and there was no issue.
I think it was just the time frame where it happened. I think the lack of warning kind of to what was going to happen. Not really like a, hey, mature, things are going to happen, because like I said, kids were buying this off the rack at the grocery store or whatever, at the 7-Eleven. Back in the day, less comics bookstores probably than there are now. I just think because it was so brutal, and it was brutal. It really was. So I think even if it was a male character in the book at that time, getting chopped up and thrown in a fridge would have been bad.
Okay.
In poor taste. I think it was in poor taste. Right and wrong, good and bad. I think it's more poor taste is what I would qualify it as. Now, if you did that today, it probably would have been received a little differently. I don't think people would be as offended. And I think part of that stems from the fact that there are a lot more female heroes now compared to 1994 or 5, whenever this was, 96. And I don't know, how do you feel it from the standpoint of quality?
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that if the problem is that it's a female character getting killed, I have a problem with that from a quality standpoint. If we kill male characters, why can't we kill female characters in comics? And I can't wait for that guy, the Jurassic Park t-shirt's wrong.
Get a real Jurassic Park.
I can't wait for those comics, everybody, and I love them. But if you're gonna complain about equality, then that's true equality. Is you're gonna kill all female characters just as much as you're gonna kill off male characters. I don't think the way that was killed is a separate issue than the idea of killing off a specific sex of character. Now, if we're going to talk about butchering throwing into a fridge, probably not the best idea to do that on a kid's book. I will gladly.
Well, it's not a kid's book, though.
But it was You could definitely track probably sales, I guess, back then, and just understand that you're not, your audience isn't 28 and up kind of thing, where they, with the maturity level to handle that. So, not necessarily that Green Lantern was a kid's book, but that it was more geared towards young adults that some parents might still not like having something as gruesome as that. But I don't have a problem with it. But then again, I'm also coming at it from a 2016 perspective when, I'm reading books like Outcast and Invincible and things that have very violent things in them.
So let me ask this now. So we've established kind of how we feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
The Killing Joke happened in the late 80s. Same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And The Killing Joke is considered a masterpiece. It's iconic. Top 10 for a lot of people. Top 10 comic book. It's just as gruesome. It's just as bad. It's a terrible thing happening to a female character, and a strong female character.
Mm-hmm.
So what, in your opinion, makes that more of the masterpiece versus Women in Refrigerators, which I get. I'm comparing this one thing that happened in Green Lantern to this iconic Batman.
I can't wait for the comments on this one, but you're assuming that I agree that Killing Joke is a masterpiece.
Well, that's fair too. No, but that's fine. But it is often considered a masterpiece.
I agree. It's also considered.
That being said, how do you feel?
For me, and I know this is going to just enrage a
tell
lot
Adam,
of people.
start
I
picking your
do.
comment.
Is that I never read The Killing Joke until I watched the new Blu-ray
That's
animated. So that was my first foray to Killing Joke. But I've known about The Killing Joke for forever. That it was a good story. It was just not one I ever picked up. I grew up more on Marvel than I did on DC, so I never really got into that. But I just didn't. Killing Joke was fine. I just, when watching it, it just didn't have the same impact as everybody boosted it up to be. Granted, the first 30 minutes is garbage. They tacked on a new story to make Batgirl seem more relevant, and then they just put fan fiction. That was blatant fan fiction.
Did you find that more insulting than Women in Refrigerators?
Yes.
There's the comments.
Because there you go. I mean,
Spoilers.
So
Hashtag triggered.
Hashtag triggered. Spoilers for the animated Killing Joke. 1, 2, 3. But in the added version, the extra 30 minutes, they have Batgirl, a Batgirl-centered story, but then she succumbs to Batman and basically throws herself on her, and they have sex on a rooftop.
I mean, who hasn't done that, though? I mean, come on. I mean...
So, it's just like you're going to complain that a woman is being killed, but then...
I think that's apples and oranges.
I
think if male, female, if you're going to succumb to Batman, you're going to succumb to Batman. If it's under a gargoyle on a rooftop, that's what it's going to happen. If it's in a park, if it's in a car, if it's in the cave, it doesn't matter. Alfred holding a boom mic filming the whole thing, that doesn't matter.
That's kinky.
It's totally kinky.
It's totally kinky.
You do you, America, and everywhere else.
But that's where I come from. That was a little sidebar, by the way, everybody. That really doesn't.
They're ignoring your side.
True. But that is not as irrelevant to this discussion. But what I'm saying is that's where I came at The Killing Joke. Everyone says it's one of the greatest Batman stories of all time. I kind of was just like, yeah, it was good. But I didn't have the same punch. And one, I didn't read it. And two, I got it through animated means. So I have a different perspective on that.
Now, I've read The Killing Joke a couple times. I've read it back more, not when it came out, I was younger, but I read it back in the day. Probably in the 90s, probably around the time the Women in Refrigerators came out. It was probably my first time reading it. It's more of an important Batman book and just comic book in general because it changed how comics were perceived between that and The Dark Knight Returns are the two real cornerstones. Watchmen is another one where it's like comics aren't just for kids, and that's what it established. But it's also, not the... I don't know. I don't think The Killing Joke is the greatest book of all time. And I also feel that there's been so many good things that have come out since that knock it down a few pegs. Maybe you enjoy Hush more. Hush is a good book.
Everybody loves Hush. Now, I haven't read Hush, so... I don't do a lot of reading on Batman, unfortunately.
Okay.
So
I mean, one of my favorite Batman books is Battle for the Cowl. That's not going to be on a lot of people's radar, perhaps, especially compared to The Killing Joke. I just think it was an iconic book, an important book. It definitely is that. And I do think it's good. I just don't think it's this iconic thing. Now,
of the Batman and stuff I did read the new Endgame storyline. I think it is, right? It just came out a
the
little while
newer
ago.
one? Yeah,
Newer one.
with the Joker.
I really like that. I really like that dark Joker approach, and I would going to put it over the Killing Joke in terms of what I liked. I like where the history puts the Killing Joke and what it did for comics, but like of what little Batman I've read, I liked Endgame more if we're going to compare Batman stories.
Okay.
But that's just where I come from. I know Batman from pop culture, and I've read a lot of Justice League that has Batman in it, and team-ups with Batman, but solo Batman stuff I'm not as keen on. But, enough of me.
I agree, enough of you. Kyle, how do you feel? Have you read...
I've never read The Killing Joke. I know, like, bits and pieces of it, but we talked about the same thing in my class, too, like, with the death and that and everything. And, I mean, I think the biggest part is that back then it was a woman dying, and then your focus group was for teens. So to have, probably ages 13 to 17 reading a book about, somebody knocking at the door, stabbing a woman, or shoving her in a refrigerator probably wasn't your best approach to continue your reading audience.
Right. Well, it's up to you, YouTube. You tell us how you feel. It's a very controversial thing, the women in refrigerators storyline. I feel like we're still talking about it today. I feel like as more and more people discover it, it sparks a whole new group of outrage or support, depending on how you feel about it. Some people are like, it's not that big a deal. It's a thing that happened. Other people are like, this is horrible, and we shouldn't allow things like this to happen again. It's tough. So let us know what you think, how you feel as far as creator rights and creator freedoms, where creators should and should not take things, versus, how you feel about women in comics in general, how they're perceived, how they're treated.
And even basic human rights.
Talk about human rights. Let's not get too political, but let's talk about human rights.
Political.
Let's not do that. It's just going to end bad. It's not. Let's not do it.
Let's not, or should we?
No, we should not. So that's about it. I'm going to wrap our discussion here. Kyle, you have a lot of things you could plug. Let's plug them.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff on my own. Check out my articles on NJ.com. You can just search my name, Kyle Bennett. I have my own photography business, so if you're looking for professional photography to be done, I'm sure Tim will link something for me in the description.
If you text it to me, I will.
I will forget to put it in there.
I will edit it later.
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty sports junkie, so you can definitely follow me for all your sports fun and my theatrics on Sunday, game day for football. All that will probably be forced to be linked in the description.
He's an Eagles fan, so if you're not an Eagles fan, that's where you start on the comment section.
Wentzwagon. Hashtag Wentzwagon.
All right. Shuster, what are you going to plug?
Next time on Capes and Scowls, I will probably be here.
Sorry. Let's pretend like he's not. They might come back. All right, so check us out. Capes and Scowls. Podcast.com. If you want to email us, it's capesandscowlspodcast@gmail.com.
Twitter?
I'm on Twitter @mad_dog_Tim. I'm really active on there. It's
@RE Shuster.
Yeah.
I am not very active on there.
Capes and Scowls has its own Twitter. It's @Capes and Scowls. We're not super active on that one because my Twitter is basically the Twitter for the podcast.
And that's fine.
It's how it worked out. Thank you for watching. Please comment below. And I hope you've been educated. Go look up more about women in refrigerators.
Hit the like button.
Oh yes, like.